and America was hungry for new entertainment. Instead, it became a graveyard for some of the most spectacular TV flops in history. We're not talking about shows that quietly faded away. We're talking about disasters. Shows that crashed and burned so hard, they left scorch marks on network schedules. Before we dive into this parade of spectacular failures, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten gems and disasters from entertainment's past. Today, we're counting down 10 TV disasters that had everything. Big stars, bigger budgets, and dreams of primetime glory, but crashed harder than a disco ball in a country music bar. So, grab your favorite vintage snack, settle in, and let's take a trip back to 1981, when television dreams went to die. Starting with number 10. 10 Police Squad, the future that arrived too early. Starting our countdown with the ultimate paradox, a show so brilliant it was doomed to fail. Police Squad, starring Leslie Nielsen, was comedy gold that audiences weren't ready to mind. This wasn't your average sitcom. Every single frame packed visual gags, wordplay, and twisted police procedural tropes. The opening credits alone were genius. They'd announce a special guest star like Lorne Greene or William Shatner, only to kill them off in the first 30 seconds. The freeze-frame endings? Pure comedy art. Actors would freeze while everything around them kept moving. But here's the tragedy. ABC executives literally said the show was canceled because the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it. Can you imagine? In 1981, networks wanted shows you could tune into halfway through and still follow. Police Squad demanded attention, and apparently, that was asking too much. Nielsen's deadpan detective Frank Drebin was perfect, delivering lines like he was reading the phone book while chaos erupted around him. The show was basically the Naked Gun movies before they existed. In fact, those movies only happened because this show was so beloved by the few who saw it. 6 episodes. That's all ABC gave this masterpiece. Meanwhile, they kept shows like The Love Boat sailing for 9 seasons. The irony? Police Squad is now considered a cult classic, studied in film schools, and spawned one of the most successful comedy franchises of the 80s. But in 1981, innovation was the enemy. Audiences wanted comfort food TV, and Police Squad was serving 5-star comedy cuisine to people who just wanted a TV dinner. It was brilliant television, trapped in the wrong decade. 9. The Brady Brides. Remember when everyone thought the Brady Bunch was cool? Yeah, me neither. And apparently, neither did 1981 audiences when NBC tried to resurrect Marcia and Jan for the Brady Brides. This spin-off reunited the Brady sisters as newlyweds sharing a house with their husbands. It was like The Odd Couple, but with more polyester and significantly less charm. The premise was simple. Take 2 beloved characters, give them boring spouses, and hope Brady magic would strike twice. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Here's the thing about the Brady Bunch. It was never actually a ratings powerhouse during its original run from 1969 to 1974. It found its audience in syndication, becoming comfort food TV for afternoon reruns. But in 1981, NBC looked at moderate nostalgic affection and thought, primetime gold. 7 episodes. That's how long it took for America to collectively say, you know what? Maybe we don't need more Brady after all. The show tried to capture that family-friendly Brady vibe, but felt more like a community theater production of your childhood memories. The real problem? Nostalgia has a sell-by date, and the Brady Bunch hadn't properly aged yet. It was like trying to make a Friends reunion in 1999. The wound was too fresh, the affection too forced. The Brady Brides taught networks an expensive lesson. You can't manufacture nostalgia on demand. Sometimes the past needs to stay buried until it becomes charming again. This show was the television equivalent of digging up a time capsule too early. Everything inside was just dirty and disappointing. But hey, at least it answered the burning question nobody was asking. What if the Brady kids grew up to be just as bland as their parents? 8. American Dream. The drama that dared to care. Now here's a show that tried to matter and got punished for it. American Dream was television with a conscience, which in 1981 was apparently a terminal condition. This ABC drama followed a white suburban family who moved to multiracial urban Chicago so their children wouldn't grow up surrounded by bigotry and superficial values. Created by the team behind Cagney and Lacey, this was serious television tackling real issues. And America responded by changing the channel. 5 episodes aired, 2 more were produced but pulled from the schedule entirely. They're sitting in some network vault like forbidden television artifacts. The show's crime? Taking itself seriously in an era when television was supposed to be an escape from reality, not a mirror reflecting it back. While CBS was serving up fantasy with Dallas and Knots Landing, and ABC was printing money with Dynasty, here comes American Dream, asking viewers to think about racial harmony and social responsibility. The execution wasn't the problem. This was quality television with strong writing and meaningful themes. The problem was timing. 1981 audiences wanted glamour, wealth, and escape. They wanted J.R. Ewing scheming in Dallas, not suburban families grappling with urban realities in Chicago. Network executives panicked faster than parents at a PTA meeting when ratings didn't immediately soar. Instead of nurturing a show that could have started important conversations, they pulled the plug and pretended it never existed. American Dream represents television's road not taken. What might have happened if networks had supported socially conscious programming instead of chasing the lowest common denominator? The show that dared to suggest television could educate and entertain simultaneously got executed for its ambition. Looking back, it's almost tragic. Here was a show trying to address America's racial tensions and urban challenges at the exact moment the country was retreating into Reagan-era optimism and denial. American Dream was delivering vegetables when America wanted dessert. The real American Dream, apparently, was television without social responsibility. 7. Walking Tall. When movies should stay movies. From the gritty Tennessee backwoods to sanitized network television, Walking Tall proved that some stories just don't survive the journey. The Walking Tall movies were raw, violent revenge fantasies starring a sheriff with a 4-foot club who delivered justice with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. They were B-movie gold, excessive, brutal, and completely uncompromising. Perfect for drive-in theaters, terrible for family television. Enter NBC, who looked at this recipe for controlled chaos and thought, let's make this suitable for 8 p.m. 7 episodes later, they realized their mistake. What made Buford Pusser compelling in the movies? His willingness to beat justice into criminals with a wooden stick had to be completely neutered for network standards. The result was a generic action show about a sheriff who happened to carry a club he rarely used. It was like making a PG-rated Scarface, technically possible, but what's the point? Bo Svensson tried his best to bring the character to television, but network censors had already performed surgery on everything that made Sheriff Pusser interesting. The violence was gone, the edge was gone, and what remained was just another cop show in a market already flooded with cop shows. This was adaptation fatigue at its finest. Hollywood's belief that any successful movie could become successful television if you just removed everything that made it successful in the first place. Walking Tall the movie was about a man pushed too far, fighting back with everything he had. Walking Tall the TV series was about a nice sheriff who occasionally raised his voice. The failure wasn't just commercial, it was creative. The show betrayed everything fans loved about the original, while failing to find a new audience who might have appreciated a gentler approach. It pleased nobody and satisfied nothing. Walking Tall became a cautionary tale about the dangers of intellectual property strip mining, taking a brand name and hollowing out everything that made it worth owning in the first place. Sometimes, the best thing you can do with a movie is leave it alone. 6. Nero Wolfe. The detective who moved too slowly. In 1981, America wanted action heroes. NBC gave them a 300-pound detective who rarely left his chair. You can probably guess how this ended. Nero Wolfe was prestige television before anyone knew what that meant. Based on Rex Stout's beloved mystery novels, it starred William Conrad as the brilliant sedentary detective and Lee Horsley as his energetic assistant Archie Goodwin. The show was intelligent, well-written, and completely out of step with the times. 14 episodes aired, which sounds respectable until you realize half the audience was asleep by episode 3. The problem wasn't quality. This was sophisticated mystery television with clever dialogue and intricate plots. The problem was pacing. In an era when the Dukes of Hazzard was screeching around corners and the A-Team was blowing things up, here comes Nero Wolfe solving crimes through conversation and careful deduction. It was PBS quality programming on a network that needed dynasty-sized ratings. Conrad brought gravity and intelligence to the role, perfectly capturing Stout's cerebral detective. The production values were high, the mysteries were complex, and the character relationships were nuanced. Everything that makes for great television in 1995. But 1981 audiences weren't ready for television that required patience. They wanted immediate gratification, fast cuts, and simple solutions. Nero Wolfe offered the opposite: slow burns, careful development, and mysteries that unfolded like fine wine aging. The show's literary fidelity became its commercial curse. Stout's novels worked because readers could take their time, reread passages, and savor the intellectual puzzle. Television audiences had remote controls and short attention spans. Nero Wolfe was quality television in an era that prioritized quantity. Quantity of action, quantity of explosions, quantity of anything except thoughtful mystery solving by a detective who preferred orchids to car chases. The lesson? Sometimes being too good for television means you're simply too good for television. Nero Wolfe deserved better, but 1981 wasn't ready to give it. Number 5. M.R. Merlin. Magic meets reality TV death slot. Double asterisk. What happens when you take the legendary wizard Merlin and make him a garage mechanic in modern-day San Francisco? Apparently, you get 22 episodes of something that vanished faster than a magic trick gone wrong. Mr. Merlin had a premise that sounded like it was pitched during a particularly creative acid trip: the Immortal Wizard. Merlin runs an auto repair shop and uses magic to solve everyday problems. It was part fantasy sitcom, part workplace comedy, and entirely confused about what it wanted to be. CBS stuck it in the Monday night 8 p.m. death slot against NBC's Real People and ABC's That's Incredible. Dash shows where ordinary people did extraordinary things. Meanwhile, Mr. Merlin was asking audiences to believe an extraordinary person was doing ordinary things, but with magic. The show got a full season, which might sound like success until you realize it disappeared so completely that most people today would swear you made it up. 22 episodes of television that vanished into the ether like they never existed. Barnard Hughes played Merlin with the enthusiasm of a man who clearly needed the paycheck, turning the legendary sorcerer into a lovable grandfather figure who happened to have supernatural powers. The supporting cast tried their best to sell the concept, but there's only so much you can do when your premise is, what if magic was boring? The real problem was scheduling warfare. Monday nights in 1981 were brutal. You had Monday Night Football dominating ABC, Mass H ruling CBS, and NBC throwing everything they had at the competition. Mr. Merlin was like bringing a magic wand to a gunfight. But even beyond the scheduling nightmare, the show suffered from an identity crisis. Was it a family-friendly fantasy? A workplace sitcom with magical elements? A fish-out-of-water story about an ancient wizard adapting to modern life? The answer was yes to all of those, and that's exactly why it failed. Mr. Merlin proved that magic can't overcome bad time slots, confused premises, and the fundamental problem of trying to make the extraordinary seem ordinary. Sometimes even wizards can't save themselves from network television. 4. Best of the West. The Western that rode into the sunset too late. By 1981, the Western was as dead as the frontier itself. ABC didn't get the memo and launched Best of the West, a Western comedy that arrived about 20 years too late to the genre's funeral. This wasn't just bad timing. This was catastrophically, historically terrible timing. Westerns had been dying a slow death throughout the 1970s. Bonanza ended in 1973. Gunsmoke finally rode off into the sunset in 1975. And by 1981, the only horses left on television were on Mr. Ed reruns. But ABC looked at Monday night, arguably the most competitive evening in television history, and thought, you know what this needs? Cowboys? The show plays square dancer Preston in a frontier town full of eccentrics, trying to mine comedy from Western cliches. It was Blazing Saddles without the edge, Young Frankenstein without the brilliance, and Airplane without the laughs. 22 episodes aired, which sounds impressive until you realize they were broadcasting into a void. America had moved on from cowboys and cattle drives to oil barons and shoulder pads. Dallas was the only Western that mattered in 1981, and it was really just a soap opera in boots. The competition was murderous. Monday nights featured Monday Night Football on ABC. Wait, this was their own network? MASH on CBS and NBC's desperate counter-programming. Best of the West was essentially competing with itself for viewers who weren't interested in Westerns anymore. Joel Higgins tried his best as the earnest Preston, supported by a cast that included Carleen Watkins and Tom Ewell. They were talented performers trapped in a doomed concept, like accomplished musicians playing a concert for an empty theater. The show represented everything wrong with network thinking in 1981. They were chasing demographics that had moved on, reviving genres that had died natural deaths, and scheduling programs against their own successful shows. Best of the West wasn't the worst show on this list, but it was the most pointless. It answered a question nobody was asking. What if Westerns weren't dead after all? Turns out they were, and this show was the funeral nobody attended. 3. Harper Valley. Some IP should come with warning labels. Harper Valley PTA was a hit movie based on a hit song, which in network logic meant guaranteed television gold. NBC's math was about as accurate as their programming instincts. The movie starred Barbara Eden as a single mother taking on the hypocritical Harper Valley PTA. It was sassy, fun, and perfectly contained in 90 minutes. NBC looked at this complete story and thought, let's stretch this into a series and see what happens. What happened was 15 episodes of television that proved you can't build a weekly series around one good idea. Barbara Eden didn't return, leaving the show to cast Barbara Eden lookalikes and hope nobody noticed. The premise was simple. take the movie's single conflict, woman versus hypocritical small town, and somehow make it last an entire season. But here's the problem with Harper Valley, the concept. Once you've exposed the PTA's hypocrisy and taken them down, what do you do for episode 2? And 3? And 15? The answer was apparently repeat the same conflict with diminishing returns until everyone involved looked exhausted. NBC's systemic failure in 1981 meant this show was doomed before it aired. They scheduled it against CBS powerhouses like Knots Landing and Magnum PI. Dash shows that understood how to sustain weekly storytelling beyond a single premise. The show suffered from what you might call concept exhaustion. The original idea was so specific and complete that expanding it into ongoing television was like trying to turn a short story into a novel by repeating the same paragraph. NBC in 1981 was a network in freefall, and Harper Valley got caught in the gravitational pull. Even if it had been brilliant, which it wasn't, it would have faced an uphill battle simply by carrying the NBC logo. The lesson? Sometimes a perfect movie is perfect precisely because it knows when to end. Harper Valley, the movie, told a complete story in 90 minutes. Harper Valley, the TV series, took that same story and stretched it until it snapped. 2. No Soap Radio. The show that barely existed. Sometimes a show fails so completely it becomes a philosophical question. If a television series airs and nobody watches or remembers it, did it really exist? No Soap Radio is our answer to that question. This ABC mid-season replacement appeared in spring 1982 like a ghost. Here one moment, gone the next, leaving behind almost no trace of its existence. It was the television equivalent of a rumor, something you might have hallucinated during a fever dream. Mid-season replacements in 1981 were basically sacrificial lambs. Networks would throw them into time slots where other shows had already died, give them no promotional budget, and act surprised when they disappeared into the ether. No Soap Radio was filler programming in the purest sense. Content designed to fill time between commercials until networks could figure out what to do next. It had no stars you'd recognize, no concept you'd remember, and apparently no viewers who cared enough to keep it alive. The show's greatest achievement was its perfect invisibility. It aired, it vanished, and the world continued spinning as if nothing had happened. In some ways, that's almost impressive. Complete and total commercial failure so absolute it achieved a kind of zen-like nothingness. This represents the bottom tier of television failure, shows that didn't even fail dramatically enough to be remembered as disasters. They just weren't. No Soap Radio existed in the space between existing and not existing, proving that sometimes the worst thing about a bad show isn't that it's terrible, it's that it's nothing at all. 1-Darkroom. The horror that vanished into darkness. And here we are, number 1 on our countdown of 1981's most forgotten flops. Darkroom, a horror anthology that disappeared so completely you'd think it was consumed by one of its own scary stories. 7, maybe 8 episodes. That's all we got of this ABC horror anthology before it vanished into the television twilight zone. Darkroom was trying to be the next Twilight Zone or Night Gallery, but it arrived at exactly the wrong moment in television history. 1981 audiences wanted comfort. They wanted familiar faces, recurring characters, and predictable outcomes. Horror anthologies offered the opposite. Different stories, different characters, and absolutely no guarantee you'd like what you saw next week. The format was the show's death sentence. Anthology series require audiences to trust the brand rather than fall in love with characters. In 1981, that was asking too much. Viewers were developing loyalty to ensemble dramas and long-running sitcoms, not taking chances on weekly horror roulette. But Darkroom had an even bigger problem. It was niche programming in a mass market era. Horror was finding its audience in movie theaters with Friday the 13th and An American Werewolf in London. But television horror was trapped between network censorship and family viewing hours. What could have been genuinely scary was watered down for 8 p.m. audiences. What remained was neither frightening enough for horror fans nor comfortable enough for mainstream viewers. It was television purgatory. Too weird for normal people, too normal for weird people. Darkroom represents the collision between creative ambition and commercial reality. It was quality programming that nobody wanted, innovative television that audiences rejected, and artistic television that networks abandoned. The show disappeared so thoroughly that finding information about it today feels like investigating an urban legend. Was Darkroom real, or just a fever dream shared by a few television historians? The answer is yes. It was real, it was gone, and it was the perfect symbol of everything that went wrong with television in 1981. And that's our journey through 1981's most spectacular television disasters. But here's what I want to know. Did any of these forgotten flops stir up memories? Drop a comment and let me know if you remember watching any of these disasters. Did you catch Mr. Merlin fixing cars with magic? Did you suffer through The Brady Brides, hoping it would get better? Or maybe you're one of the few people who actually saw No Soap Radio and can prove it existed? If this deep dive into television disasters entertained you, smash that like button. It helps more nostalgia fans find our community. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because we're just getting started. I've got more forgotten flops, bizarre TV experiments, and nostalgic disasters planned. Until next time, remember, in the world of television, today's disaster might be tomorrow's cult classic. But sometimes, a flop is just a flop, and that's okay too. Thanks for joining me on this trip through TV's forgotten graveyard. I'll see you next time on Star Spangled Nostalgia.